Pete, thanks very much for giving us.
Thank you very much.
Can you just give us an idea of what Pete Smith Limited actually does?
Primarily, as the name suggests, we're an inspection company. That is our primary role. We're not a company that does work and also does inspections. We are an inspection company. So that is our main criteria. Everything we do as a result comes about from inspections. Whether it be remedial work, installations, it all comes about from people who know us from the inspection work.
Right. What kind of got you into this end of the business?
Completely by accident. I got made redundant in the 80s. Needed a job, obviously. A friend of mine had a brother who worked in an IT department for a lighting company. And he said, "Oh, I'll get you a start." So the two of us trooped down in 1990. Had an interview, sort of, and the end of the story is we never went back. The other chap is still working for Verylight.
Right.
20 years later.
So you've had a mixed career over the years.
Very much so. It started like most people do in this business, where you do what you do because you love it. And in my case, what happened was I discovered fairly quickly I had no intrinsic interest in lighting. It just, nothing that I have an interest in. However, after 6 months of coiling cable in the electrical section and generally filling trucks and unfilling them, somebody actually read my CV and said, "Oh, look, you're a trained fitter." And I said, "Well, yes, that's what I used to do, is build machinery." And they said, "Oh, you know about rigging then?" And I said, "What's rigging?" And they said, "Well, you obviously know more about it than we do. Get in that shed and sort that rigging out." And that was how it started. 20 years later, obviously with a mortgage, with a family, all the rest of it, it's suddenly a job where you'd probably still do it unpaid, but the requirement is actually you need money now to live.
A few quid in the door.
Yeah, whereas when you started, actually the fact that somebody paid you for doing something you loved was just a complete bonus. If you could have afforded to, you'd have done it for nothing.
What would be your first memory of actually putting something up in the air and going, "Oh God, I hope this stays up"?
The first gig I ever did, rigging-wise, was a rigger probably well known in certain circles. He's been around for a while. A very nice gentleman called Brian Wilson. And when I knew him, he used to have two little miniature collies called Broke and Shackle. And he used to turn up and get at gigs, park the two dogs on a flight case lid, and they would sit there in unison like this, watching him up in the roof or in a picker till he came down, and then it was, "Hello, Dad, say hello to us." And he was known everywhere, and the point is all the people in the venues, no dogs allowed, they're with him, they can come in. Brian took me onto my first gig, which was 3 2-ton points in the Albert Hall roof.
For a first gig?
For a first gig. And I have to say it took 3 of us to get the 2-ton steel and the motor chains up there, and it was lying your back on the catwalk when you're finished, gasping for air. And that was literally my first gig. That was how it started. What I did was I worked in the warehouse running the rigging department in the day, and I used to go out for nothing during the evenings on the London shows with the production riggers to learn.
Right.
So there was a large element of unpaid work to actually get what I wanted out of it. There was no other way of doing it. Unless you started at the other end, which was working for Stage Miracles or something like that, unloading trucks.
For riggers, probably wasn't as high a profile as it is right now.
No, definitely not. Some of the English riggers had harnesses, although it was definitely in the minority. The people that had harnesses were the big American tours that came over, and you could spot them because their crew were all wearing harnesses. My first time in a particular roof that we know well, I asked how to climb the masts when asked to do so, and was told, "Oh, sorry mate, if you want to rest, you just stick your arm through the steelwork, a bit uncomfortable, here's a span set and a shackle, just loop it through the steelwork and stick your arm through, have a rest and then get on with it and do what you've got to do." Obviously now that just couldn't happen. You need a Cardex to get into the roof, you have to be signed in, You have to have a training to move off the catwalks, and you're constantly monitored by camera. Never mind people assessing what you do while you're doing it.
Yeah.
So yes, in terms of changes, not the same world.
Where did you actually start to see this kind of change in the way work was being done?
I joined Unusual within 18 months of joining Samuelson's. As they changed into theatre projects and Vari-Light, I moved. And I actually wanted to be a rigger. That's the bit that interested me. But when I got to Unusual at the age of 25, I realised that actually, age-wise, I'd missed the boat. Because if I wanted to be at the top of my game, I already needed to have been doing it for 10 years, so that now at age 25, I would be at the top of my game.
So you got to the point where you realised that, in as much as you loved the whole rigging side of things, you'd almost missed the boat.
I'd
to an extent, I suppose.
Pretty much. The other thing I'd realised joining a rigging company was that riggers were 10 a penny. You know, they were everywhere. It actually coincided. I was brought in to run the warehouse, or assist in the running of the warehouse. But the guy that unusually employed servicing and looking after the chain hoist, once he'd found out that actually I knew how to do that as well, he hated the job, so he just, oh great, I don't feel guilty about leaving them then, bye, and left.
Oh right, okay.
And I moved into his shoes. And actually, once I'd done that, then it became apparent that not rigging, but what I was doing now was the niche market. Because riggers were everywhere. In those days, you could pick up a harness, a rope, I'm a rigger, and off you went.
Yeah.
But actually getting somebody to fix what they were using, that was the difficult bit, and there weren't too many of those people about. At that stage, there was only 2 rigging companies you could go to, and only one of them had started to fix anything, and that was the one I was working for.
Right, okay. I suppose people were coming in from sort of the crane industry and that kind of...
No, not particularly. Again, it was very much homegrown. I mean, one of the riggers I remember that I started working with, who's also very well known now, he was a qualified butcher. And he got into it not so completely by accident, because his father was a film and TV rigger. So it was kind of in the blood, but he'd actually trained and qualified as a butcher, and that's what he was going to do. But again, ended up doing this, and he's rigged some of the biggest shows in the world, like Q40 and VE Day and all that kind of stuff. Most of the older riggers, if you actually ask them, they got into the business doing something else, and actually they ended up doing that because it was a good bias for their skills.
Right.
That actually were learnt in a different trade. I'm not saying being a butcher's going to help, because in this case the guy's father was a rigger, and that makes all the difference. It is kind of strange now, talking to riggers you meet out on site, and then one of them goes, yeah, my dad's so-and-so. And you're there going, we're all getting old.
Yeah.